Please welcome to the stage the President and Chief Executive Officer for the Nuclear Energy Institute, Maria Korsnick.
Well, hello and welcome to the 2024 Nuclear Energy Policy Forum. Let me begin today with some gratitude. First, thank you to our sponsor, Constellation, for helping to make this event possible. And thank you to our staff, our board, and our members for our commitment to your commitment to the work that we all do. And of course, thank you to everyone joining here in this room and online today. We are living in dynamic times. Over the past several years, the energy sector has seen an emergence and convergence of two priorities: the need to decarbonize and the need to achieve greater energy independence and security. The past year has brought another dimension: projections for an overwhelming increase in energy demand. Last year, grid planners nearly doubled the 5-year load growth forecast. A recent study from Grid Strategies predicts the grid will need to add 38 gigawatts or more of new electricity during the next 5 years, driven by advanced computing, artificial intelligence, and the electrification of the manufacturing and transportation sectors. The question is, how do we meet that demand while continuing to decarbonize and achieve greater energy independence? And I'm proud to say that nuclear energy remains the key, not just to unlocking a cleaner, more secure future, but satisfying demand, powering progress, and improving the lives of people around the world. The good news is that while so much has changed since my last State of the Industry address, one thing hasn't. The United States still boasts the highest performing nuclear fleet in the world. Our fleet runs efficiently, it runs safely, and it produces reliably in the face of more extreme weather conditions and increasing demand. And now, utilities are extending the lives of some plants to 80 years and taking steps to restart others, like Holtec's Palisades plant in Michigan. And in California, the Department of Energy reached an agreement with PG&E to support extending operations at Diablo Canyon. Since my last speech, we've seen significant progress in the industry. I want to take a moment to celebrate the first advanced reactors on American soil. In Georgia, Plant Vogel's Unit 3 and Unit 4 have entered commercial operation. And as I speak, these Westinghouse AP1000 reactors are generating safe, reliable, clean power for more than 1 million homes and businesses. With every carbon-free kilowatt, the project not only strengthens the case for nuclear energy, it solidifies its commercial viability. This is more than a win. It's a watershed moment, and it won't be the last. So let's take a moment to give everyone involved in the completion of Project Vogel a great round of applause. You made history. And just a few months ago, I attended a conference that was attended by Tom Fanning. He's the former executive chairman of Vogel's owner, Southern Company. And he spoke, and he made a really important point. He said, building nuclear is a challenge. And today, we are rising to that challenge. And we are. We're doing just that. Over the last 12 months, we've advanced more applications through the regulatory process. Kairos Power saw a movement on two fronts. Its Hermes construction application was approved last December, and now they're already making progress on a second application for the next generation Hermes reactor. The NRC accepted NuScale's Voyager 6 module, their design application. And TerraPower submitted a construction permit application for its Kemmerer, Wyoming plant and plans to break ground here in just a few weeks. At the same time, the major employer in town, which is a coal plant, is planning to decommission, potentially threatening jobs and even the community. But once operational, the TerraPower plant is expected to put people back to work. And already investment is flowing into that region in anticipation. We've put more shovels in the ground too. In Texas, Abilene Christian University has started building a center for its research test reactor as its application is being reviewed now by the NRC. And in Canada, the Ontario Power Generation began site preparation for North America's first ever small modular reactor plant. There's so much to celebrate, and the truth is, this is just the beginning. These headlines from the past year are a part of a much larger and a much longer trend line. At every level of society, across borders and aisles and industries and sectors, support for nuclear has materialized into demand. And the race to realize its potential is officially underway. Geopolitical conflicts and climate commitments have forced nations to see nuclear with new eyes. They've gone from soft pedaling, or in some cases, flat out decelerating nuclear, to really ramping them up. This shift is staggering, and I've witnessed it firsthand as I've traveled the world. Just a couple of years ago, do you know what leaders at COP, the most important global climate conference in the world, what were they saying about nuclear? Well, not very much. We worked hard to ensure that nuclear was a part of the global conversation. And last year at COP28, 25 countries pledged to triple nuclear power by 2050. And some called the conference the Nuclear COP. Beyond pledge, countries around the world, they're already taking action. Poland began initial site work for its very first nuclear power plant. The Netherlands reversed course with a further life extension for their operating plant and plans for new construction. India raised ambitions for nuclear generation capacity and an important policy shift by seeking private sector participation in development to help accelerate the growth. And the Philippines is starting a nuclear power program. It signed a nuclear cooperation agreement with the United States, and it's taking significant steps toward deployment in the 2032 timeframe. And the momentum on the world stage, it's not slowing down. While I was attending the first ever nuclear energy summit for heads of state, the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, a former German government official, stated that she believes that nuclear can play an important role in the energy transition. John Podesta, President Biden's senior advisor for clean energy, also made big news at that same meeting. He indicated that the U.S. would join France and some other countries in encouraging the World Bank to eliminate restrictions on nuclear funding. And policymakers in the United States are working to ensure America can win the race on commercial nuclear. While Democrats and Republicans can't agree on much, they agree that nuclear is the key to both national security and global competitiveness. Other nations need nuclear energy, and they want to do business with us. They trust us, and they recognize the outstanding operation of our fleet. Because when we export American nuclear, we export American standards, the highest standards in the world. Last year, NEI hosted meetings with more than 20 countries that are interested in cooperating with the U.S. with strong interest in our nuclear technologies. Idaho, I also had that opportunity to attend the first ever U.S.-Africa Nuclear Energy Summit in Accra. And since then, Ghana has announced they will select nuclear vendors by the end of this year. Other countries will be sure to follow. And in fact, in a few weeks, I will lead a trade mission for our member companies to Sweden and Finland. In this moment, we can't continue to power our country, let alone the world, on the backs of Russian uranium. Reshoring the fuel production to American soil is an imperative for our future. And today, I'm happy to report that we are one step closer to making this long-held goal. Lawmakers recently approved $2.72 billion in funding to support a domestic fuel supply and to make our nation stronger. And just a few weeks ago, as a condition of this funding, Congress passed a ban on Russian uranium fuel imports, and President Biden signed it into law yesterday. To that end, we are focused on two things: work with the Department of Energy to ensure that this funding builds a competitive domestic supply chain and revitalizes the domestic supply chain. And we also want to ensure that the waiver process is predictable and efficient. Thankfully, we're beginning to see some progress. Urenco approved the first expansion project last year at its plant in New Mexico. Orano's board of directors approved a $1.8 billion investment to increase enrichment capacity. Global Laser Enrichment, GLE, is also on track to demonstrate its novel technology this year. Converdyne, the only converter in the US, announced the restart of its plant last year. And Centrus started production of high-assay, low-enriched uranium last October, becoming the first new US-owned uranium enrichment plant to begin production since 1954. Advanced fuel technologies will be deployed over the next few years with an enhanced accident-tolerant fuel feature, increased enrichment, higher fuel efficiencies, and those are going to enable power uprates as well as longer fuel cycles. And of course, to assume the mantle of energy leadership, domestic fuel production is just one part of the equation. We must also accelerate advanced nuclear development and extend the life of our current reactors. Fortunately, here too, lawmakers are backing up their words with action. In addition to the $2.72 billion for domestic fuel supply, this year, Congress, with bipartisan support, approved a 40-year extension of a critical nuclear insurance program and passed an $800 million fund to get a competitive grant program for advanced nuclear. This past year was also a historic year in state legislatures. 20 states took action to support nuclear energy. 20. Never before have we seen so many move to support nuclear and with such commitment. Today, they're competing to be the next nuclear hub. Virginia finalized incentives for new nuclear in its desire to become a national, if not global, leader. Michigan and Minnesota passed ambitious clean energy plans that include nuclear assets. Washington State allocated $25 million for Energy Northwest to support their new clean energy investments. And Tennessee announced the Governor's Nuclear Advisory Council and has increased its investment in nuclear supply chain companies with the goal of becoming a world leader. And Kentucky created a permanent authority to oversee deployment and administration of nuclear. Red states, blue states, purple states, they're all coming together to protect existing nuclear and to prepare the next generation of deployment. And we're also seeing more engagement from state public utility commissions on nuclear policies. And at the same time, companies in the private sector are increasing their investment and doing what they can to gain an advantage. Nuclear-related financing is growing. Électricité de France announced the sale of Europe's first green bond of nuclear energy last fall. Ontario issued the first provincial green bond for nuclear in Canada. And just a few weeks ago, Constellation Energy offered the first green bond in the United States to finance nuclear energy projects. Nuclear-related acquisitions and public offerings, they're also up. Westinghouse Electric Company was acquired by Brookfield and Cameco in order to better compete as a demand for nuclear grows. 2 microreactor companies just went public this year. Nano Nuclear completed an IPO, while Oklo, which is backed by OpenAI founder Sam Altman, they used a SPAC. Companies are making big moves to deploy nuclear too. Equinix, the world's largest digital infrastructure company, just agreed to purchase 500 megawatts from Oklo. Microsoft, Google, Nucor just launched a joint initiative to develop new business models and aggregate their demand for advanced clean electricity technologies, again, accelerating the development of advanced nuclear. But the tech industry isn't just waiting for the next generation of nuclear to be built. Amazon Web Services recently purchased a nuclear-powered data center campus from Talon Energy. And New Jersey's utility company, PSEG, announced this month that they're in talks with to power data centers with existing nuclear reactors. These companies are sending a clear signal to the marketplace. Demand for carbon-free power is up, and specifically nuclear, and it's strong and growing. It's exciting to see how energy industry is using the clean energy transition to forge new business models. Recently, for example, NOV, which is a global energy services firm, formed its own nuclear venture, and that nuclear venture is called Shepherd Power. And that's to supply the oil and gas sector with clean heat and power at scale. And I mean scale. They're not talking about building 1 or 2 microreactors. They're talking about ramping up to several hundred after 2030. And NEI is working with Shepherd Power on ways that the regulatory structure can be adapted to significantly reduce the amount of time that it takes to license these very small reactors. And I mean significantly reduce. From an average of 5 years per application to 4 months. And while maintaining the highest levels of safety. Now, this can be done through several changes that recognize the small size and output of microreactors, from emergency protection zones that are measured in feet rather than miles, to incorporating learning from the regulatory approach that we use today for research reactors that have safely operated on college campuses across the United States for decades. But the implications of these changes to the NRC regulatory structure, they're not going to just apply to microreactors. They're going to have impacts on small modular reactors and the large reactors as well. The reason behind this race towards nuclear is simple. The world needs more power, and we need it sooner than projected. Today's artificial intelligence is shattering expectations. ChatGPT became the first application ever to reach 100 million users in just 2 months. Now, companies are expanding their data centers to increase the computing power and accommodate generative AI's increasing capability. Our existing fleet, working with future advanced technologies, is critical to help meet this moment. Today, decarbonization is a global, non-negotiable. Industries need more power, more clean power to reach their net zero goals. And this means extending the licenses of the current operating fleet and adding to it. Today, energy security is national security. And as I mentioned earlier, nations around the world have growing populations with growing electricity needs. We need to help these nations access more power and build more clean, affordable power systems. Fortunately, we know there's one source that's up to the task, one source that checks all the boxes: nuclear. Friends, the state of our industry is strong. Demand is high. Support is growing. Dirt is moving. And more progress is coming. Over the next 12 months, 3 or more applications are expected to be submitted to the NRC for advanced reactors. 2 or more advanced reactor projects are expected to begin construction. The Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission is likely to approve the construction permit for the GE BWRX-300 at Ontario's Darlington site. In addition to the 12 submittals for 20-year license renewals, 1 more plant will be added to that growing list and will submit their renewal to the NRC this year. And several utilities are preparing numerous power upgrades with a cumulative capacity increase of about 2.5 gigawatts. That's 2.5 gigawatts of clean, carbon-free generation. That's equivalent to more than 2 large light water reactors. And don't be surprised when you see large reactors beginning to show up in U.S. utilities' integrated resource plans in the near future, like we have already seen in Canada. But what we do now and how we do it will determine what our industry and our world looks like in the future. First, we need to ensure that we help early movers move. I'll state the obvious. It's hard to lead the pack, and it takes more than just courage. We need incentives, grants, and cost mitigation to help make it easier to take that leap. One thing Vogtle has taught us: with every new unit, we learn something. The construction gets more efficient, the costs come down, the risks decrease, the benefits increase. And that's why we're working with Congress to support our early movers policy to bridge those cost hurdles that are associated with that first-of-a-kind technology. And just as important, we're working to protect the critical incentives that Congress has already approved as we push for timely guidance on these tax credits that not only support the next generation nuclear, but they also support our current fleet. And we're also working to ensure guidance on the hydrogen tax credits and ensure that it includes the existing nuclear fleet so we can enhance the development of a robust hydrogen economy with the nuclear power plants that we already have. Next, to realize the gains that we're making, we need regulators to devote their energy to safety and eliminate unnecessary processes. Over the past few years, the NRC has taken some pretty important steps in this direction. For example, NRC staff have made changes to the license renewal application review process, and that's saved thousands of unnecessary hours and shortened the schedule by months. Kairos Power's construction permit application, for example, was completed in record time. In both of those cases, the improvements are notable, but we need to continue moving in this direction because the demand on the NRC is only going to increase. Just consider this. We asked our members, and more than 90% of our industry has said that they anticipate operating for at least 80 years. Now that means that a third of our existing fleet will submit license renewal applications in the next 5 years. We also know that the pace of siting and licensing applications is going to continue to grow. The Commission has been revising its Part 53 guidance, and they've addressed many of the concerns that the industry raised, but there's still some opportunity to streamline. I want to share a recent quote with you from NRC Chair Chris Hansen. He said, "I expect every leader in the NRC to look closely at the why of our policies, processes, and procedures, and then develop more efficient and effective ways to accomplish our safety mission while making room for this increased scope of work." I am so grateful to the Chair's comments and for the NRC's commitment to reform. As he notes, efficiency and safety are not mutually exclusive. We can achieve both. But realizing this vision requires just as much a shift in culture as it does in process. The NRC is on a journey to make meaningful change, and we need to continue to support and encourage that journey. Regulatory modernization isn't the only place that we need to focus. We also need to build out a safe, secure, and resilient supply chain. So if you're a lawmaker, start incentivizing action. And if you're a business leader, start pushing for it. We also need to train a workforce, and as soon as possible. The Department of Energy projects that we'll need 375,000 additional workers by 2050 just to manufacture, construct, and operate advanced reactors. This workforce, it includes a broad spectrum of workers, from the skilled trades to engineers, technical staff, to all the roles that you see that it takes to make these facilities a success. But filling those jobs will require proactive expansion of apprenticeships, vocational schools, university programs. So I'm calling on everyone here to spread the word, talk to high school students, visit colleges and universities. Wherever you're recruiting, make sure that people know nuclear jobs are high quality, long term. Which brings me to my last point. We have to make it happen. Demand for energy will only keep growing. And there's only one solution on the market that can provide clean energy for 60, 80, 100 years. Truly, there has never been a more exciting moment for our industry. And it reminds me of something that Steve Jobs said back in the 1980s. You know, he believed, and rightly, that personal computing would transform the world. And he wanted to find people who were excited by that vision, or in his own words, people who desired to make a dent in the universe. That feeling, that sense of possibility and excitement, it's palpable in nuclear right now. We're like Detroit at the beginning of the 20th century, or Silicon Valley at the end of it. We're on the ground floor and we're going up fast. And that's why it's good to see so many of the people in this room who are committed to nuclear. You're helping shape the industry that's shaping the world's future. So thank you for all the work that you've done so far. And together, let's make a dent in the universe. Thank you. And now I'm going to join NEI's Mary Carpenter, and she's going to facilitate some questions from those of you that are either joining us here in person or you've joined us virtually.
Thank you for that great speech. It's really such an exciting time for the industry.
Oh my gosh, fabulous time.
Okay, we're going to spend a few minutes taking questions from the audience, and I'll remind those of you in the room and joining us virtually that you can submit your questions via Slido following the instructions on the screen. All right, you ready for the first question?
I'm ready.
Okay. You talked about the growing energy demand we're seeing with new technology advances. Tell us how you see both large and small nuclear meeting this moment.
Well, thanks for whoever asked us that question. As I look ahead, the volume of power that we need, you hear from our chief nuclear officers, it's 100 gigawatts by 2050. You hear from the liftoff report, it's an additional 200 by 2050. We went to the COP meeting, they talked about tripling nuclear by 2050. It's really going to take all shapes and sizes. I mean, that's going to include some large reactors, it's going to include some small modular reactors, and as I mentioned, talking about Shepard power, it's also going to include the microreactors. So this is a very special time for nuclear as it's doing sort of new things, that innovation pipeline sort of being chock-a-block full. There's all these different makes and models that are coming out. And what's beautiful is in the past where nuclear sort of might not have been an answer because nuclear was just big, when nuclear is big, medium, small, and really small, all of a sudden nuclear can be an answer to places that it wouldn't have been considered in the past. Very exciting.
Great. You talked about how the industry is in a different place than last year. How do you see public perception of the industry today?
Oh, I just see public perception for nuclear right now just growing. I think it's a combination of energy security and climate security. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you would have said, oh, the environmentalists, they like these other things, but they don't really like nuclear. And that's not the case anymore. You have a lot of people that really care about the environment. They're looking at nuclear and saying, look at that, carbon-free, clean. It's a beautiful opportunity, not only for individuals like folks in the environmental community. We get support on the Republican side, we get support on the Democrat side. So it's a real coming together to support nuclear.
What should we be worried about as the biggest barrier to nuclear adoption?
Oh, the biggest barrier. Can we move fast enough? I think that's one of our challenges. I think we have a lot of people that are really very interested and they want it right now. And so I think our challenge is how do we, in fact, encourage and incentivize getting some of these first of a kinds built, because you don't get your second, third, and fourth if you didn't build the first one. So we got to get the first ones built, let people really understand and appreciate what they offer, what they bring to the marketplace. I think that's our biggest challenge. And so when I say can we move fast enough, that's a combination of the regulatory structure. It's a combination of the financing, structures. We need people to really take the long game and just appreciate how big this is. And it's almost bigger, I think, than people can imagine, because it's not just here in the United States. It's around the globe. Everybody's looking for that clean energy answer, and nuclear's it.
This is a good one. You mentioned it's important to build a workforce. What can we do to bring more people into the industry?
Well, as I mentioned, when we say bring them into the industry, sometimes people think, oh, you have to get an engineering degree. And that's important for some, but not all. We need all different types, as I mentioned, the tradespeople, folks that go to vocational school, people that can get 2-year degrees and 4-year degrees. And so it's really an opportunity across the spectrum. You think nuclear plants, you think nuclear engineers, but you need a lot of different types, right? Mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, mechanics, electricians, INC techs, operators. We talked before about that coal plant that was going to close and the TerraPower plant that's going to be coming in Kemmerer, Wyoming. There's a beautiful opportunity of coal to nuclear. When I ran the power plant, we would bring folks from our coal fleet down to help us with refueling outages. So when we say that coal folks can be working as nuclear folks, I mean it from my heart. We've done it. We do it today. And so this great opportunity to take folks that already have really good jobs in a certain field can now move over and have really good jobs in the nuclear field too.
Okay, looks like we have time for 2 more. How can we attract new customers to nuclear over the next 5 years?
I think we attract new companies by doing, quite frankly, by showing. Like you are today, when people are aggregating their demand and going to nuclear plants and saying, I want to get power from you because I want to say that whatever my product is, that it's clean. It's clean steel, or it's a clean data center. They really want to be associated with that clean, carbon-free energy. And I think the more that we do that, and people understand, why are you going to nuclear? Oh, because it's clean, it's reliable, it's around the clock, it's rain or shine. Nuclear sells itself because of the attributes that it brings to the marketplace.
Okay, last question. What are you most excited to see over the next 5 years in the US and abroad?
Oh my goodness. Well, we're going to be building, and I'm excited about building. So as I mentioned, oh my gosh, we got different makes and models that are going through the nuclear regulatory process. We're going to start actually moving dirt. We're going to start actually constructing things, not just here in the United States, but here and abroad. And nuclear is here to stay. We are here to stay. We're going to change the world. We're going to change the universe. And I'm just excited to be a part of it.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone, for the questions. And thank you, Maria.